Hai semua orang di Malaysia dan dari dunia luar. Hello everyone in Malaysia and from the outside world.
My name is Caleb Dixon, and I am the Supreme Head of Malaysia, and the people with me today are my task force.
My name is Gift Obima, and I am the Prime Minister of Malaysia.
My name is Xavier Lowe, and I'm the commanding officer of the elite forces in Malaysia.
So, as the head of my task force, I deal with the relations regarding the welfare of our people and dealing with the consequences of this zombie outbreak. My Prime Minister is responsible for coming up with a plan on how to eliminate the zombies and the safety measures that our people should take, while my commanding officer leads his forces to handle the killing of the zombies and population control. I am currently working at this time to communicate with other nations for aid. We need to resupply our men and resources. And so I will now hand it over to my commanding officer to describe how the zombie virus originated and spread.
Our first documentation of the zombie outbreak started with a foreign man visiting his family in the most populated city in Kuala Lumpur. He went to a nightclub where the virus originally spread to some bystanders. In the upcoming days, the Chinese New Year festival was to be celebrated. And in that event, a huge portion of Chinese Malaysians of the population was out in the streets, not aware of the threat of the zombie virus growing bigger within the crowds. From then on, the spread became worse, and almost 30% of the population in peninsular Malaysia had gotten the zombie virus before we implemented a plan to deal with it. The eastern part of Malaysia was not impacted as much, hence why we decided to gather our people to stay out there. But you can find more details on this subject in the Virus Z page of our official website. And now that I'm done explaining the origins of the outbreak, I will hand it over to the Prime Minister to speak of the plan she strategizes for our country and people.
So to start off, we basically created base zones and safe zones. And before anyone freaks out, just know that everything we did was necessary for the survival of our country. Yes, you did hear right, bait zones, which were basically made for the criminal, sick, disabled, and old citizens we would use as bait. With them being bait for the zombies, we gathered all the healthy and young people that had a higher percentage of surviving to the eastern half of Malaysia, the safe zones. Basically, we set up the zones in the mountains where we made units for shelter, food, resources, and any other survival necessities needed for people to live off of in those high altitudes. We use helicopters for transportation and distribution of our people and resources/supplies. We then tried to hold off the threat of the zombies in our half of Malaysia by putting up barriers and soldiers near them to fight them off. But Commanding Officer Lowe can better explain this.
I'll be glad to. Me and my forces were stationed all near the borders of the barriers and held them off until they became really low in numbers in our safe zones. But with helicopters, we were able to transport my men to the western half of Malaysia to engage in fighting the huge threat by sending them in groups, few at a time. We did lose a number of men, but those deaths were worth bringing Malaysia out of this tragedy. But that is all.
Our nation's citizens applaud him and his men for their bravery and persistence. We admired their determination to fight this zombie outbreak, despite being tired and suffering many losses.
So back to where I left off. As people are settled in the mountains, we decided to set up workforces for our people to help out with many useful things, such as building and constructing tools and weapons, and providing aid and backup when it is needed. We decided to improve our healthcare because this zombie outbreak has introduced other problems related to health. This outbreak has caused despair, PTSD, and even depression in our people. And with our location, people are already dealing with medical issues because they're having to adapt to the high altitudes. So we are setting up healthcare units for these purposes. Is that everything?
You can talk about the survival tips for the outcast citizens from the safe zones.
Well, all I will say is that on our website, I put a link for the survival guides and tips for people who are located outside of our safe zones and are able to access it. In our next segment, we will go into details about those specific tips. But for now, I'm going to hand it over to our head of state to end this off.
To the people of Malaysia, more specifically the survivors in the red or bait zones, for the people who choose to stay, or for the ones who were stuck there, don't, and I repeat, do not worry. If you are able to follow our tips, you should be better equipped to handle surviving for yourself and your family. Like we mentioned on the website, we are sending people on helicopters out there to gather you all. Just make sure you mark your spots with red, and we should be able to spot you. As long as you don't attract any zombies to your location, your chances of surviving increases. But on an ending note, thank you, citizens of Malaysia, for your cooperation and handling of this outbreak and tragedy. I don't want this incident to lower your hopes in the nation returning back to normal and possibly better. We will, as a nation, stand strong during this time. And to the outside world, we are all in this fight together, and we will not lose.
Selamat tinggal seluruh Malaysia dan dunia luar. Farewell to all of Malaysia and the outside world. Until next time.